What did Soviet, British, and American soldiers do with German women? The guns of World War II fall silent in Europe, but for Germany, the silence is heavy with the dust of defeat and the presence of foreign armies. The Third Reich is shattered, its cities pulverized, its population in ruins. Across this broken land, three Allied powers, the Soviet Union, Great Britain, and the United States, carve out zones of occupation, each bringing its own distinct culture, ideology, and approach to dealing with the defeated German populace. But amidst the grand geopolitical strategies and the daunting task of rebuilding, a far more intimate and human drama unfolds. The complex, often unspoken, relationships between German women and the soldiers of these occupying armies. Imagine the landscape. German men are largely absent, dead, imprisoned, or returning home as broken shadows of their former selves. Into this void step the soldiers of the victorious powers, young men from vastly different worlds. For German women, these soldiers were not just occupiers. They were figures of power of the outside world, and, in many cases, of stark contrast to the defeated and demoralized German men. What were these interactions like? How did German women navigate this new reality? And what did these encounters reveal about the shifting power dynamics of post-war Europe? Join us as we delve into the untold stories of German women and the armies of occupation, exploring the fascinating and often contradictory relationships forged in the aftermath of World War II. Who did they fear? Who did they welcome? And who, perhaps surprisingly, captured their hearts? We begin in the East, in the Soviet occupation zone, the future German Democratic Republic. Here, the encounter between German women and Soviet soldiers was perhaps the most fraught, the most shadowed by the brutal realities of war. For the Red Army, Germany was not just enemy territory. It was the land that had inflicted unimaginable suffering on the Soviet people. The Eastern Front had been a theater of unparalleled brutality, and the Soviet soldiers arrived in Germany carrying the weight of immense loss and a thirst for retribution. Initial perceptions were overwhelmingly defined by fear. Nazi propaganda had relentlessly demonized the Bolshevik hordes, painting grotesque caricatures of Soviet soldiers as subhuman barbarians. For many German women, especially in the early days of occupation, this propaganda seemed to become a terrifying reality. Deutsche Welle's powerful documentary, Under a Veil of Silence, unflinchingly reveals the widespread sexual violence perpetrated by Soviet soldiers, particularly in the chaotic aftermath of the Battle of Berlin. The sheer scale of these crimes is staggering, with estimates suggesting hundreds of thousands of German women were raped. This wasn't just random violence. It was a manifestation of the brutalization of war, a horrific expression of dominance and revenge. However, to paint a complete picture, we must move beyond this initial devastating wave of violence. Even amidst the fear and trauma, human interactions, however complex and constrained, began to emerge. The Soviet military command, to its credit, attempted to impose order. As the Russian embassy in Romania highlights, Marshal Ivan Konyev, a prominent Soviet commander, took measures to address the issue of violence, particularly in Silesia. Stalin's Order No. 229, though perhaps not fully effective in preventing all abuses, demonstrates an official recognition that unchecked violence was detrimental to establishing control and order in the occupied zone. This order stipulated harsh punishments for soldiers engaging in sexual violence, reflecting an attempt, however imperfect, to curb the excesses. And despite the official prohibitions and the shadow of fear, relationships did develop. Necessity played a role. German women often relied on Soviet soldiers for food and protection in the devastated landscape. Proximity also fostered interactions. Soldiers were stationed in German communities, and daily life inevitably led to encounters. And in some cases, genuine human connection blossomed amidst the ruins. Imagine a young Soviet soldier, barely out of his teens, stationed in a small East German town. He's far from home, weary of war, and encounters a German woman his age, perhaps working in a field or trying to rebuild her home. They can't easily communicate verbally, but a shared glance, a small gesture of help, a silent exchange of food. These small human moments can bridge even the widest divides. These were often fragile, unequal relationships, born of circumstance, but they were real nonetheless. The demographic impact is undeniable. An estimated 100,000 children were born in East Germany with Soviet fathers. These children of occupation represent a hidden legacy of these complex encounters. Yet, unlike the American war brides, emigration for German women to the Soviet Union was virtually impossible. The Iron Curtain descended, solidifying the divide. Cultural differences, the trauma of war, and the stark political realities of the Cold War meant that these relationships, even when based on genuine affection, rarely translated into lasting unions beyond the borders of occupied Germany. The stories of these women and their Soviet partners remain largely untold, lost behind the Iron Curtain of history. Moving westward, we arrive in the British occupation zone, primarily in northern Germany. Here, the atmosphere was different, more controlled, more British. The British approach to occupation was characterized by a certain reserve, a focus on order and administration. And this extended to their interactions with German women. Unlike the Soviets, there was no widespread narrative of revenge or retribution driving British soldiers' behavior. However, neither was there a widespread embrace of fraternization. British policy, from the outset, discouraged close relationships with Germans, particularly romantic ones. As documented in UK parliamentary records, the British government actively debated and, for a time, restricted marriages between British soldiers and German women. These debates, continuing well into the 1950s, reveal a deep-seated official unease about these unions. The British authorities worried about the social implications, the potential for divided loyalties, and the complexities of integrating German wives into British society. Beyond official policy, cultural factors played a significant role. British culture of the time emphasized reserve, emotional restraint, and a certain social distance. This cultural backdrop likely influenced the behavior of British soldiers in Germany. While individual acts of kindness and even attraction undoubtedly occurred, the overall climate was not conducive to widespread romantic relationships. Imagine a British soldier, a young man from a quiet English village, stationed in Hamburg. He's polite, correct, follows orders, and maintains a professional distance from the German population. He might interact with German civilians in the course of his duties, perhaps overseeing reconstruction efforts or maintaining order. He might even feel sympathy for their plight. But the idea of forming a romantic relationship with a German woman, the former enemy, feels unthinkable, a breach of unspoken social codes, both military and cultural. The result? Significantly fewer long-term relationships and marriages compared to the American zone. While German women in the British zone might have perceived British soldiers as orderly, disciplined, and perhaps even fair, they were less likely to see them as romantic partners or figures of liberation in the same way as their American counterparts. The British presence was a presence of control, of administration, but not, generally, of intimate connection. The German war bride phenomenon, so prominent with American soldiers, was far less pronounced in the British zone. Finally, we arrive in the American occupation zone, encompassing southern Germany. Here, the atmosphere crackled with a different kind of energy, an almost palpable sense of possibility. American soldiers, arriving from a land untouched by war, brought with them not just victory, but also the allure of the American dream, prosperity, optimism, and a seemingly boundless future. As DW's Sleeping with the Enemy and accounts from the National World War II Museum reveal, American soldiers became associated with material abundance in a way that Soviet and British soldiers simply could not match. They had access to cigarettes, chocolate, nylon stockings, coffee, items that were luxuries in post-war Germany. This economic disparity, while creating an uneven power dynamic, also undeniably contributed to their appeal. For German women facing hardship and scarcity, American GIs represented a lifeline, a connection to a world of plenty. Imagine a young German woman, working to clear rubble in Munich, her family struggling to find food. An American Jeep pulls up, and a GI offers her a bar of chocolate, a rare treat she hasn't tasted in years. He smiles, speaks broken German, and asks her name. In that simple exchange, a connection is made. A spark of hope ignited in the bleakness of post-war Germany. For this woman, and for many others, the American soldier is not just an occupier, but a symbol of a brighter future, a potential escape from the ruins of the past. Furthermore, American culture itself, even in its simplified, Hollywoodized form, held a certain fascination. Jazz music, swing dancing, and the promise of a consumer society, these were powerful magnets, especially for younger Germans eager to embrace a future different from the grim past. The statistics speak volumes. Approximately 14,000 German women became war brides, emigrating to the United States, the largest contingent compared to any other occupying power. German newspapers of the time, as analyzed in academic studies, often romanticized these German-American pairings, portraying them as symbols of reconciliation and the allure of the American dream. While acknowledging the complexities and potential inequalities within these relationships, The sheer number of German women choosing to build their lives with American soldiers underscores the unique appeal of the American presence in post-war Germany. The war bride phenomenon became a defining feature of this era, a testament to the powerful currents of attraction, hope, and the desire for a new beginning in the aftermath of war. In the aftermath of World War II, Germany became a laboratory for different forms of occupation, and the relationships between German women and the soldiers of the victorious armies offer a fascinating, if often overlooked, lens through which to understand this complex period. German women navigated a landscape of fear, opportunity, and shifting power dynamics. They perceived Soviet soldiers through a prism of fear and, at times, forced interaction. British soldiers with respect but also distance, and American soldiers with a mixture of hope, attraction, and the promise of a brighter future. The choices and perceptions of these women, shaped by the devastation of war and the allure of the occupying powers, reveal not just personal stories, but also broader truths about the cultural and political landscape of post-war Europe. The differing approaches of the occupying armies, the contrasting cultural backgrounds, and the economic realities of the time all played a role in shaping these intimate encounters. But the question remains: how did these deeply personal interactions, these relationships forged in the shadow of war and occupation, ultimately influence the larger geopolitical relationships between Germany, the Soviet Union, Great Britain, and the United States in the decades that followed? Did these human stories, played out on the ruins of the Third Reich, leave an enduring mark on the path of history? Share your thoughts and perspectives in the comments below.